All right, terrific. So we're into our fourth practice. We talked about challenging the process. Well, obviously you need to enable others to act. If you're challenging the process and trying new things, one of the essential things you need to do as a leader is enable people to work within those systems you create. So enable others to act has two main commitments. One is fostering collaboration by building trust. That word trust keeps coming back through this workshop, and facilitating relationships. And then strengthening others by increasing self-determination and developing competence. That's what you do as a leader. And I would say most of us relate leadership to this mostly, right? We think about how I help other people do something, especially teachers, right? You're enabling your students to do things. So I want you to reflect for a minute about times when you felt most powerful, right? When you felt really capable and competent and committed to the thing you're doing. Behaviors that make people feel powerful are enabling. Feeling powerful is like being at your best. And obviously trust is the heart of this. We got to think about how we trust the people when we're feeling powerful. So I think many of you have heard of this idea of the Pygmalion effect, right? The self-fulfilling prophecy. Again, it's common sense. You want to treat people as they should be treated. When you imagine people doing great things, they're more likely to do great things. And if you think people are, whatever words you use, POS, bad person, whatever term you happen to use for that person, they're probably going to live that out for you in one way or another. The other concept I want you thinking about is this idea of flow. So a professor named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi has really studied this for years. It's one of the topics in the subject of positive psychology. And I would argue when you really understand this concept of flow, it's one of those times when you're at your most powerful, right? When you're in this state of flow. And here's a simplistic way of looking at a way to get into a state of flow. Essentially what this chart is showing you is it says when the level of challenge meets your level of skill, you're in what we might call a flow channel, right? You can look at that diagonal there as the flow channel. So this is why many of us who have hobbies and things that really captivate us constantly challenge ourselves with new information and new techniques and trying to get better at things. But the other thing to think about is when you're looking at the people you lead and work with, what does it look like if I'm high on challenge and low on skill? That upper left quadrant, that looks like anxiety and stress, right? Beginning teachers maybe, people in their first year of their doctoral program maybe, right? You have a lot of stuff to do and you're still learning the ropes in terms of this. Conversely, think about that lower right corner, right? When you have lots and lots of skill and you're not being challenged much. Stagnation, complacency, those kinds of things, right? So we don't want to be in either one of those corners. So the act of leadership is to really try to find that sweet spot for the people that work with you. As they develop more skill, you give them more challenge, right? You don't want to overwhelm them with challenge, but you want to kind of get them into that state of flow. So what Csikszentmihalyi found with his studies is it takes time to ramp it up and get it ready, and once you're in that spot, don't let yourself be interrupted. That's the key to staying in flow. And if you're constantly taking yourself out of flow, pretty soon you're even more frustrated than when you started. The other thing I want to talk to you about is this idea of motivation. So when we're enabling others to act, the heart of that is thinking about motivation. How many of you think that leaders' role is to motivate the people they work with? All right, well here's the kind of the dirty secret about leadership and motivation. You don't motivate people as a leader. Right? People aren't motivated by their leaders, right? Motivation comes from inside. So as good leaders, you create this environment. And what Daniel Pink kind of unveils in his book, which is really fascinating, is that you have to create an environment that promotes autonomy, mastery, and purpose. You need to amp up the work environment. Think of those three things, and when you look at yourself in a motivating work environment, those three things were probably at play, right? You had a good sense of autonomy and control over what was happening. You were gaining skill and becoming more masterful at the things you were doing. And there was this bigger purpose behind all the stuff you were doing. The other thing that I think is essential in all this is being a good coach. And the heart of a good coach is listening. Sometimes it's hard to not give advice, right? As you're listening to someone talk about a problem, we want to solve their problem for them. And this is where I want to kind of draw a distinction between mentoring and coaching. And both are very essential in the roles you play as leaders. But a mentor listens well, but also has some suggestions for the person. right? Here's what I would do, or here's some advice I have for you. That's what a good mentor does, because a mentor typically has been in that place the follower has been in and can say, yeah, you know, I can kind of relate to where you're at, and if you want to get to this position where I'm at, here's some steps and some things I can do to help you there. A coach is different. A coach knows that the genius is within that person, and to have intrinsic motivation to work on their goals doesn't ever give advice, they just ask more questions. The key questions you ask as a great coach are what questions and how questions. And if I can just remember to do that, I can get into a coaching mode. And you're just intuitively listening to the person by asking more and more questions. What and how are better than why? Why makes a person a little more defensive. Like, why do you think that, Annie? Well, then she's got to defend her position. But I say, what are some benefits of what you're talking about, Benny? When you describe that, I want to hear, what are the benefits? Right now, she's going to still probably defend why she thinks it's a good idea, but it's from a different position. So think about how you can be more coaching in your leadership style rather than mentoring. But obviously, you're going to be a mentor sometimes, and then sometimes you got to be the boss as the leader as well. So we've just finished the Enable Others to Act. It's one of the most important of the practices.